Now we want to go and talk a little bit about what's going on in France with regards to the coronavirus. Obviously, the news that we expected was officially confirmed yesterday that the Ireland-France game is going to be postponed, and the Paris Saint-Germain Dortmund game in the Champions League is going to go ahead. And there's just been a lot of chatter around that. We also now know that Kylian Mbappe has a sore throat. So, Philippe Auclair, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
How's your throat?
It's pretty good. I'm not coughing, and I think I'm absolutely safe to talk to at the moment.
Great. How is Kylian Mbappe, more to the point? Do we know? Are we getting like a lie? Is somebody camped outside Kylian Mbappe's house at the moment in the hope of having a Harry Redknapp-style conversation with him through his car window?
He has a sore throat, as you said. He's got a common cold, as I believe they're called. No reason to worry about him particularly. So, but you can be sure that conspiracy theorists and coronavirus conspiracy theorists will have plenty to say about that. But he's fine. He's fine. He's just got a little cold.
Well, that's good news, because we don't know what's going to happen when the first footballer contracts the coronavirus. Certainly not when it's like one of the best footballers in the world, 24 hours out from an absolutely massive game in the Champions League. What is the scenario in terms of these Champions League games? The Paris Saint-Germain Borussia Dortmund game is obviously going to go ahead, and yet the rugby match isn't.
Well, it's going to go ahead in an empty Parc des Princes, which is it's going to be very, very odd. I think we had a rehearsal of that in a way when we watched the game in Serie A between Juve and Inter over the weekend. But it's actually creating a little bit of a problem, and not just because the public are not won't be allowed in the stadium, but because of the reaction of the PSG fans, which, to be honest, has been a display of complete imbecility that honestly is absolutely shocking. Because basically they're asking, the Ultras are asking the fans to go to the stadium and completely ignore all the health and safety procedures, and to gather around the stadium in huge numbers. So you can imagine what it's going to be like on the night. I hope they see the light of reason in the end. I'm not too convinced, because there's been the reaction to the decision taken by the government to ban all gatherings with more than 1,000 people in confined spaces has been particularly hostile from a number of football supporters groups. I mean, it's very sad to say that, but the French police will be there in force. I think they're talking about 400 to 800 police force around the stadium to enforce the exclusion zone. But apparently there are people who are willing to put everybody else at risk to be there. That's where we are at the moment, I'm afraid.
Is this in keeping with the PSG Ultras, the imbecility that you speak about? Is that exactly what would characterise them as a group?
I wouldn't go that far. I'm sure there are some great people, but there is a fringe in this ultra movement, and certainly not. I wouldn't certainly castigate the whole ultra movement with this kind of judgment. I only do that because this particular group of people, the Ultras de Paris, have spoken out, and they've actually gone on French radio, French national radio, asking people to gather around the Parc des Princes for the occasion. Now, if that's not a proof of imbecility, I don't think anything else is.
In terms of the actual football on the field, it looks at the moment like it could well be another round of 16 exit for PSG.
Yes. In fairness, even without the measures taken by the French government, I think most people would be quite worried. Even though the scoreline, you look at it, you think, 2-1, you can do something about that. But it's more the manner of the performance and the fact that there are so many problems at the club, within the club at the moment, that you feel, okay, it's going to be the usual. It's spring. The swallows arrive. The primroses pop up, and PSG gets out of the Champions League. And it's just as good an indicator of what the season is. And yes, the manner of their defeat in Dortmund, the manner of the various games that they've played recently, especially, I would say, I think there's a malaise within the dressing room, which is not related to the virus. It's just related to the fact that Thomas Tuchel is finding it life very, very difficult, that there are a number of fault lines within this dressing room, and that you wonder what's going to happen come the end of the season. So it's not a good atmosphere. 2-1 down, you would think we've got a decent chance here, but that's not the way people think about it. There is a general atmosphere of negativity around the club, which is quite hard to comprehend, I must say, sometimes, but which is real and which no doubt will affect all the players.
It seems Neymar was particularly unhappy after the first leg in terms of potentially being forced to play, I think. Philippe, was that the situation?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not the relationship that has soured. Neymar, since he came back, has actually been probably PSG's best player, match in, match out. Then there were the problems when he was injured and was not injured, according to him, and he was left to convalesce when he would have liked to be on the field. The medical staff from PSG decided otherwise. He didn't take it very nicely, and even more embarrassingly, he decided to go public about that. So, yes, it's not. He's not in a good mood. Nobody's in a good mood. He hasn't been to the carnival this season, which is the first time in many, many, many years. So that makes him even more angry. And yes, the atmosphere is not great with him. If you add to that Mbappe has this cold, then is a doubt, obviously. And the fact that there are, Massimo Verratti is also suspended, which is a huge loss. And you have it's not a bunch of happy bunnies. That's the way I would put it.
Kylian Mbappe with a sore throat and Neymar not being able to go to Carnival sounds like the worst crisis to ever hit a football club.
Something like that. Maybe we shouldn't mention the problems that Nasser Al-Khelaifi, the chairman of the club, also has with a number of people who are interested in his activities. But that's a different matter altogether, I'm sure.
Is Neymar going to be at the football club next season?
Good question. Officially, the line is yes, absolutely. Otherwise, many people are having their doubts. You see, at the moment, it just doesn't quite make sense the way that the team has been built. There are too many people, too many attacking players of too great a talent, if you see what I mean. A hyperabundance of talent, which means that somebody's going to go at some point. Now, obviously, of these talents, you would say that the first two are Neymar and Mbappe, so you want to keep them whatever the cost is. And unfortunately, these are the two that there are the most rumors about. I mean, it's not just Neymar, by the way, it's also Kylian Mbappe. And the entourage of the players has certainly not discouraged people from spreading those kind of rumors. We know that, I mean, we've got to try and understand how much of the current problems are linked to the unease surrounding Thomas Tuchel, who was supposed to be a solution for PSG. At long last, a manager who was going to look at the interest of the club long term and build a team, not just for a season, but for 5-10 seasons to come. It hasn't happened. And in fact, Thomas Tuchel has exactly the same problem that every single manager has had before him at the club since the Qataris took over. And there doesn't seem to be any great plan in place. And then on top of that, obviously, you've got the situation with the players and the two of the top players in the world, who are wondering if PSG genuinely is the place they want to be in to win the titles, to pursue the careers, in a league where they've played, honestly, pretty badly, and they'd still find themselves a zillion points ahead of everybody else. So, it all makes sense, and it all makes no sense, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Philippe, just to go back to the coronavirus stuff, France has essentially said that all Ligue 1 matches until the 15th of April are going to be behind closed doors or limited to 1,000 fans. What's the response been like from the French public? Is there a high level of panic, a low level of panic? What's going on?
I was in France just a few days ago, and I was struck by how paranoid people were. I was struck by the blanket coverage in the media. I mean, you genuinely couldn't switch on a television or radio without hearing horror stories about the coronavirus. I honestly thought that this is a neurotic country, and yes, the response has been. You'll have to excuse me for saying that, but it's been imbecilic. As in, at the same time, the same people are completely paranoid, and they're completely oblivious of the real dangers that we're facing right now. So the fans have been saying things such as, and I've been on the receiving end, you can imagine, in social networks of a number of interesting opinions, shall I say, and because of that. They're saying, well, why is it that we're having this and we're having that, and the Disneyland is still open and this and that, and people still take the tube, and you try to explain to them it's not quite the same thing from having 40,000 people in a confined space for about 2 hours, but it's getting you nowhere. I'm afraid that it's not in France, not yet. I think it will come. We're still at a stage of both paranoid fear and denial. It's not a great cocktail.
No.
And no, it's not. And it's linked to the political situation in the country. It's linked to the social situation in the country, and it's linked to the actual, the fact that France is, after Italy, the most affected country. I mean, I don't know what the reaction would be in Ireland or in Britain if suddenly you had 5 members of parliament who were at home with coronavirus, and your Minister of Culture who was actually in hospital, which is the case in France. So we shall see. But the reaction at the moment, is a bit crazy, because people say, oh, why are they preventing us from attending football, as if football, were really the most important thing in the world, when quite clearly it is not. And, to quote Jorge Valdano, of all the things which don't matter at all, is the most important, but nothing more than that. And it seems that people still haven't realized that, and the fans' reaction to the banning of gatherings of more than 1,000 people in a single place has been so far pretty poor, I'm afraid.
Are Monaco the only team? Did I read that correctly, that they're the only one who aren't? Is that because they don't have 1,000 fans?
That's cruel of you to say that. They sometimes manage to get 2,000 or 3,000. That's what I've heard. To be honest, I was talking to you, I was desperately trying to get a response from Liga and Conforama, and believe it or not, there is actually, you go to their website in French or in English, you go to their Twitter account, you go to the social networks account, there is absolutely no trace of any statement whatsoever about the coronavirus.
Right.
That should tell you plenty about the state of affairs with football in France at the moment.
Philippe, you've been covering football for a long time at this point, very clued in on the English response and what they're doing. Do you see these leagues all finishing as either on time or this season? What do you expect to happen?
I mean, I'm no specialist, but if you judge it by, what's happened in other countries, and basically you see, it's like being on the shore and watching a wave. So you have a pretty decent idea of how the wave is going to behave. I would say that we've got to take what's happened in China, in Southeast Asia, when you will have seen that the World Cup qualifiers have all been postponed. In Korea and Japan, that was yesterday. You see what's happening in Italy. The best case scenario, if I can use the expression best case, is matches played behind closed door. My own feeling is that football will stop, and that we're going to end up with competitions that are not finished. That's my own feeling, and I don't quite know how else we can, unless there's miraculously the virus disappears. I don't think that there is any other solution, and that to deny this possibility is basically to blind ourselves to what is far, far more important than knowing whether Liverpool is going to be champion for the first time since 1990.
Yeah.
A bit more important to have people not dying, isn't it?
100%, right. I absolutely agree with you. The one thing that, in times of crisis, the old Roman bread and circus, if everybody is home stuck and they don't play the football matches, I do wonder if there's actually a case to be made for a certain sports event to go on behind closed doors to give everybody communal TV experiences.
Yeah, you can. I mean, and there are, you cannot stop living. You shouldn't die because you don't want to die. And you can also die you're in the soul, so to speak. No, there are events which will. Football is different in as it's all about also getting together. You know, I think one of the reasons why football matches will be affected is not just because you've got 70,000 or 40,000, or in the case of Monaco, 2,000 people gathering in a confined space, which is in the open air. And to be honest, if people are careful, it's probably not that dangerous. But what is dangerous is also all the congregation going to the game, going to the bar, going to the pub, talking to each other, being in confined spaces. And this is what is just as dangerous. So you can understand what is happening. But I agree with you. There's going to be an element of bread and circuses to it. And I'm sure that every single step measure is going to be taken for this to be the case. But on the other hand, at the moment, we're dealing with probably a spike coming. We have the very clear example of how being quite definite in our response can work, which is the case in South Korea and in China at the moment. So we should take them as examples. We'll see what happens with Italy, which is honestly a catastrophe for this country. And we don't want this to happen. So prevention is better than cure. And so let's hope that common sense prevails. And if it means that we've got to wait a little bit more to have our fix of football, well, so be it. If it means that Euro 2020, which is, by the way, shown to be the absurdity that everybody said it would be, with the competition being played all over the continent, which was crazy anyway, how this is going to happen, I genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know how it's possible, because there's going to be delays in every single competition.
Yeah. All right. Philippe, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Philippe Auclair giving us some thoughts, very prescient about what might be coming down the tracks.